The Alaska Native Art Auction Gala is March 21st, 2026 in Anchorage, Alaska. Donate artwork by February 27th, 2026 and be eligible to win $500. Help sustain Indigenous-led media, including National Native News. Donor forms and details are found at knba.org.
Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The Seneca Nation wants to clarify legal boundaries when it comes to the state's enforcement of civil and criminal cases on tribal land. Proposed legislation would require some consensus among stakeholders on a case-by-case basis. It's one of the notable assertions of tribal sovereignty going on right now. We'll talk about that, as well as a road on tribal land that is getting attention from the U.S. Justice Department. That's all coming up right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas, sitting in for Antonia Gonzalez. A new report by the Urban Institute based in Washington, D.C. is looking closely at Native American tribes and their continued challenges with broadband infrastructure. KUNM's Jeanette Didios spoke with Amanda Hermans, a research associate for the report, on how sovereignty comes into play.
Herman says as sovereign nations, Native American tribes have the right to govern their own digital infrastructure, which in the past wasn't possible.
This was rooted in a history of not having the ability to take sovereignty over their access to things like broadband and other utilities.
Herman said broadband providers in the past have not allowed tribes a seat at the table when it comes to making decisions on how to serve their communities with internet. But she says that's changing, and tribes are building expertise in broadband construction and taking back control of these plans. But that doesn't mean they have to do it by themselves.
Some tribes, depending, on their priorities, may not have the desire or the capacity to do that all themselves. And there's also a lot to be gained by partnering with knowledgeable industry experts and maybe contracting out some of those services or roles to bolster their capacity.
She says building broadband infrastructure on tribal lands is crucial on many levels and can help bring in revenue and create jobs for tribal members. For National Native News, I'm Jeanette Didios.
Old growth forests with just modest exposure to fire are now most at risk for severe wildfires. That's from scientists from Oregon State University and the USDA Forest Service. As KLCC's Brian Bull reports, most of the problem is lack of native stewardship.
Researchers say 3/4 of the Pacific Northwest forests that historically saw low and mixed severity fires are highly vulnerable to devastating blazes today. Part of this vulnerability came after indigenous people were driven out and therefore unable to practice controlled burns to reduce slash and pests as well as rejuvenate the landscape. OSU fire ecologist and forestry professor Meg Krawchuk.
There's a reawakening of that knowledge and movement forward in terms of Indigenous fire stewardship, but there are so many parts of the landscape that are not ready to receive fire well and that require additional care and tending to bring back fire to our landscape.
Pockets of landscape less susceptible to crown fire called fire refugia may help buffer the sensitive forest areas and reduce severe fire risk by up to 20%. For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull.
A permanent tribute has been unveiled inside a Mesa Park for slain San Carlos Apache teen Emily Pike. She was murdered last year after disappearing from a nearby group home. As KJZZ's Gabriel Piatarazzi reports, the memorial is meant to replace a roadside shrine sitting on private property.
Spring training is in full swing at Fitch Park, home of the A's. Near the baseball diamonds and a playground, the city has planted a tree. Next to the sapling is a plaque with an image of Emily that reads in part, "No more stolen sisters." Beside that is a metal bench engraved with a bloody handprint. This is all a few miles south of Mesa Drive and McKellips Road, the intersection where Emily was last seen alive, and where the makeshift shrine was erected. Her family is now asking everyone to leave that old spot alone. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrorazio.
I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
8th Generation is a Seattle-based lifestyle brand owned by the Snoqualmie tribe, offering authentic native-designed blankets, jewelry, and gifts. More at Reservation Economic Summit booths 805 and 21 and at 8thgeneration.com, who support this show.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. In Wisconsin, the Lac du Flambeau tribe is facing off against federal justice officials over outside use of a road on tribal land. The issue has escalated into road barricades, backlash from town residents, and a U.S. congressman calling the tribe's actions extortion. Tribal officials say it's a matter of sovereignty, but now U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi is weighing in, demanding the tribe hand over $500,000 in fees paid by the town. In Oklahoma, a case going to the U.S. Supreme Court could determine whether a landmark legal decision over criminal jurisdiction also extends to civil cases. And in New York, the Seneca Nation is seeking greater control over law enforcement decisions after decades of jurisdictional confusion. These are among important tribal jurisdictional issues unfolding around the country. We'll hear about what's at stake, and you can join us with a comment or question. Call 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE, and you can always leave a comment on our website and social media pages. Let's now meet today's guests. Joining us from New York is J.C. Seneca. He is the president of the Seneca Nation. President Seneca, hello and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Yahweh Scannell, it's good to be here.
Good to have you. Joining us from Washington, D.C., we have Jonadev Chowdhury. He is the principal of Chowdhury Law and also ambassador of the Muscogee Creek Nation. He is, of course, Muscogee. Jonadev, hello to you as well, and welcome back.
Thank you, sir, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And joining us from Okmulgee, Oklahoma, is Jason Salzman. He is the press secretary for the Muscogee Creek Nation, and he is also Muscogee, of course. Jason, good to have you on the show. Welcome to Native America Calling.
Hishjay, everyone. Stongon Falachka. Jason Salzman Chohochifkados, Muskogee Adowa, and Omalegera Tikachka. And it's very much an honor and a privilege to be here always on Native America Calling and to be able to put some Muskogee language out into the world. So thank you all for being here, and I'm very honored.
Yeah, I sure do appreciate that warm traditional greeting there, Jason. Beautiful, beautiful words in your language. Thank you. President Seneca, I want to begin with you. A bill just heard in the House would revoke a 1948 federal statute that hands the state of New York jurisdictional control over Seneca territory. You're quoted as saying the bill will strengthen public safety. How so?
Well, it puts the jurisdiction and our sovereignty back to where it needs to be. The federal government wrongly gave the state of New York criminal jurisdiction over our territory back in 1948. And the opposition of the Seneca Nation Council at the time when this was going on in 1945 went to Washington, engagement against this concept. And actually, we have a record resolution on the books from that time opposing it. And so these things were done without our consent, and we believe that it shouldn't have been done, and we are trying to right now deal with certain issues within our territory, jurisdictional sovereignty issues, which is at the basis of this, and relative to the criminal activity, the influx of illegal drugs on our territories, and we are looking for ways and trying to find ways to better equip us to deal with that.
Okay. So with regard to public safety and these jurisdictional issues, how will this ultimately make your people safer?
Well, it helps will help keep criminal activity off our territories, or try to regulate it in a way that it's minimized. It gives us the ability to keep people safer, because right now people don't feel safe on our territory, people that live here, because of we have had of recent time, we had 3 murders within a 60-day period on our territory. And we have to find ways to keep our people safe from these types of elements. One was a home invasion, another one was that happened outside the home, but still was a murder that occurred. Shootings. We have people that are coming in and off our territory that have been charged with outside agencies with cases of murder and different types of things. They're freely to come in and roam and set up shop, do business on our territories without any ramifications. And these criminals, they know the loopholes in regards to who can and cannot do anything about it or against them. And they utilize that to be able to continue to affect the safety of our people here on territories.
So what law enforcement agencies now will effectively be responsible for maintaining the public safety there on your tribal lands?
Well, it's up to us. We were right now in the process of making sure that we have marshals. They're not law enforcement people, but they're more or less like a peace officer. We have them, but they're in the process of now going to training facility. Here, our first group of our officers are going to go to training to get the training necessary to be able to have a foundation of being a law enforcement officer. And so there's a lot of work to do in regards to building that here on our nation, in regards to the court system. We have to, codify our laws, criminal law, all those different things have to be set in place before we're able to take that over and to be able to work with outside law enforcement in regards to what happens here. But right now, it will be status quo when this bill is moved through, is passed, and hopefully signed by the president, that there will still be outside law enforcement will still continue to have their ability to do that. But once we're able to get our place in order, then with an agreement with the U.S. Attorney, that we're able to then agree with the United States that we're capable and ready to take that on. And at that point, that's when that would become effective.
Okay. Outside law enforcement. Thank you. Now, the Tribal Council just dissolved an agreement with the county sheriff's office, and that was aimed at improving law enforcement for your citizens. However, there were complaints from tribal citizens of over-policing. What's the balance between a need for effective prosecution and then perhaps too much?
Yeah, I don't think there was over-policing. I think there was a lot of misinformation that has been spread through the community on social media and things like that. The agreement, the MOU that we had with the Cattaraugus County Sheriffs was very specific in regards to what it was a services contract that we were having with the Sheriff's Department. It was enhanced, so it was focusing on drug activity, sex trafficking, and criminal activity on one of our territories, which is basically out in the Allegheny territory near the city of Salamanca. There is just a haven of drug activity. The city that's located approximately 20 miles from our territory is Jamestown, New York. and they are the number 2 city within the state of New York for drug trafficking outside of the Bronx. And so we have a corridor between Cleveland, Erie, Jamestown, and Salamanca, Olean, the southern tier of New York State along the Pennsylvania border, where the trafficking of drugs is at a high level, and we've been trying everything possible. They've had drug task force. There's, certainly the drug dealers know that they come and set up in the city of Salamanca or on the territory down there. They have basically free reign to do their business, whatever needs to do. And we have to take steps in regards to our people wanted answers now. They don't want solutions 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. What are you going to do now? And from the people's initiative of our people on the Allegheny territory, this is how this came to be. And, that's why these things were moved on. They were put together. And the council did pass that concept of the MOU and everything, and that was moving forward. But people on our other territory of the Cattaraugus territory, which is about 45 miles away from that, were the ones that were basically questioning and against this MOU. And so at a council session, they pressured the council into taking a vote on this. Unfortunately, the council rescinded that, and that's where we're at today with that. But we're still trying to make our efforts forward as best we can to protect our people, to stop the drug dealers, because a lot of the folks that are against law enforcement are supportive of drug dealers. Our own people are supporting drug dealers, and in this involved in this drug activity that's going on our territory. So they're also a part of that problem as well. And so they want to make sure they protect their business. They want to keep selling drugs. They want to keep poisoning our community because it's all about money. And so that's what they're trying to do. And by, getting people to be against law enforcement, it makes their life easier and they can continue to do their business. And so, it's an unfortunate thing, but that doesn't deter us. We're going to continue to try to do our best to make sure our people are safe and we rid our territories of illicit drug trafficking and sales and usage, it has to be a multi-pronged answer to this. It's not just law enforcement, it's everything else. It's education to our youth. It's community involvement. It's families that have to be involved with people who may be in addiction. It's offering the services that are necessary for them to be able to get that.
President Seneca, I'm sorry, we have to take a break here, but thank you for coming on the show and helping our listeners better understand this issue you folks are facing. Short break, and we will be right back. Hundreds of Native artists arrive in Phoenix this weekend for the annual Herd Museum Guild Indian Fair and Market. It's a tradition spanning more than 6 decades, drawing artists from more than 100 tribes in the U.S. and Canada. We'll hear about that and explore other notable new creative events on the next Native America Calling.
Support from Davis Keelan Law Firm, a New Mexico firm standing with Native families suffering catastrophic loss. When tragedy strikes Indian country, we fight to restore stability, dignity, and justice. Bringing a voice to Native families and communities for 20 years. More information, daviskeelan.com.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We're taking a look at 3 issues of tribal jurisdiction in different parts of the country, from New York State to Wisconsin. In a moment, we're going to Oklahoma to hear about a case that could influence tribal civil jurisdiction cases in the future. But first, I have one more question for President J.C. Seneca of the Seneca Nation. And President, if this bill in Congress succeeds, does that solve the Seneca Nation's jurisdiction problem, or are there other steps you're going to need to take in order to alleviate some of the challenges you talked about earlier with drug trafficking and other legal challenges?
No, I think, it's not going to be an immediate fix to the situation that we're having, but it gives us a path forward to be able to address the many issues that we face. As president and as a tribal leader for the last 30, 40 years, I have always asserted that we have jurisdiction over our territory no matter what outside governments say, whether it's the federal government or the state government. We are in control of what happens on our territory. And if this bill passes or if it fails, that's still the position. And so anybody that's on our territory, I believe that we have jurisdiction over. And if the federal government and the state government are not willing to engage or be helpful or to work with us, then Seneca Nation, we're going to have to figure a way out to take things into our own hands to make sure that we can do the things possible to make sure that our people are safe here and take care of this drug problem that's happening on our territories.
Thank you, President Seneca. Let's now talk about Oklahoma, and to do that, we have Ambassador of Muscogee Creek Nation and also Principal of Chowdhury Law, Mr. Jonadev Chowdhury, on the line. He's in Washington, D.C. And Jonadev, in the case we're talking about today, Muscogee Nation citizen Alicia Strobel says she is a Muscogee citizen who works and lives on the Muscogee Reservation, so she should not be required to pay state income tax. Now, that's how it works for me in New Mexico if I live and work on my reservation, and it works like that for my wife here in North Carolina, too. So what's different about Oklahoma?
Nothing should be different about Oklahoma. The history of federal Indian law is a constant teeter-totter between respect for the federal Indian law foundations that recognize the pre-constitutional nature of inherent tribal sovereignty on one side, and on the other side, an outcome-oriented approach to Indian law in which either Congress or the courts try to figure out a way around the pre-constitutional nature of our sovereignty. So for well over 4 decades, there has been a longstanding principle that actually goes back to the very earliest days of the federal court system that recognizes that states cannot tax tribal citizens for income derived on tribal land when those tribal citizens reside on tribal land. And tribal land under federal law includes all land. The legal term is Indian country, includes all land within a reservation. So there's nothing unique about Oklahoma. What's going on here is the state of Oklahoma is trying to whittle down the historic victory that Muscogee Nation secured in the McGirt case in 2020, which recognized our continuing and surviving reservation boundary, and somehow they're trying to create new law and claim that there's something unique about Oklahoma reservations, which is not the case. A reservation is a reservation is a reservation.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Jonadev. Now, the Oklahoma Supreme Court, they ruled against Strobel, saying the landmark McGirt decision doesn't apply to civil and regulatory law. Is it a big leap to connect the criminal jurisdiction aspect of McGirt to civil applications?
The definition of Indian country is critical in both civil law and criminal law. And the definition of Indian country for both of those arenas comes from a statute known as 18 U.S.C. 1151. So a determination that a reservation exists has importance in both criminal and civil arenas. Why? Because under 18 U.S.C. 1151, if land is a reservation, it is by law, by definition, Indian country. So it's no stretch at all to apply a reservation finding in the criminal context to the civil context. It happens all the time, but Oklahoma's attempted to create some unique exception based on civil tax law to say, well, we may have a reservation in one context, but not another, which is absurd.
Okay. But this goes back to the whole issue with McGirt to begin with. Now, this huge swath of land in Oklahoma is considered reservation land. And essentially, if this lawsuit were to go through, if Strobel were to be successful ultimately, it could potentially mean millions and millions of state income tax revenue no longer going to the state of Oklahoma, with so many Native American people that could possibly be exempt if they live and work on tribal lands there on those reservations that were never officially disestablished. I mean, it's got to come down to the money at some point, right?
Yeah, so you can't talk about the Strobel case without talking about McGirt and another case, Castro Huerta, which came out 2 years after McGirt. I want to make clear the McGirt decision did not find that the reservations now exist, and our reservations weren't created by McGirt. Instead, the U.S. Supreme Court recognized the fact that our reservations had never ceased to exist, had never been disestablished. Mm-hmm. And that finding was held despite years, well over 100 years of, in many cases, illegal attempts by the state of Oklahoma to pretend our reservation didn't exist. So there was, implicit in the McGirt finding was a recognition that there were many illegal exercises of state jurisdiction over our lands that did not result in our reservation being disestablished. So the McGirt decision, just for your listeners, I'll summarize it very briefly, held that Congress had never explicitly disestablished our reservation, and therefore it exists. And unless Congress shows its face to the world and chooses explicitly to reduce our reservation will continue to exist. Yes, it was a criminal case, but the finding that land is a reservation is important for both criminal and civil context. 2 years later, in an effort to narrow or minimize the McGirt decision, the U.S. Supreme Court issued the Castro Huerta decision, which basically created new law, in my opinion, and many Indian law scholars' opinion, and held in dicta that tribes now were parts of states. It's the first time a statement had been made like that by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was in dicta. We're trying to cabin that language. But your first guest, deep respect for Seneca, the Seneca people, and I appreciate President Seneca's comments. The effort that Seneca is pursuing to address public safety at Seneca is similar to the effort Muscogee Nation has been engaged in, working with all national organizations, every national organization, including NCAI, to address that dicta in Castro Huerta. There's a resolution, it's SAC 22-043, that's called the Legislative Proposal for Improving Public Safety in Indian Country, that addresses some of the harmful dicta in Castro Huerta, specifically to prevent potential intrusions such as the state's efforts in the Strobel case. And that, please have your listeners take a look at that legislative proposal. We're still we've worked with national organizations such as NCAI, NIWRC, NARF, on and on and on, and regional organizations as well. If that proposal is passed by Congress, that will help clarify the jurisdictional landscape in Indian country. It brings us to Strobel. After the historic win of our nation in McGirt, the state of Oklahoma went full press, spending millions of dollars on a campaign on an ad campaign, as well as filing dozens and dozens of lawsuits trying to undermine or limit the McGirt decision in every conceivable area possible, including in the area of tax law. That's how the McGirt the tax cases were the environment that Alicia Strobel's case came up. She was a citizen lives on the reservation, works for Muscogee Nation, derives all of her income from Muscogee Nation, and under long-standing case law going back to the 1970s case, McClanahan case, her income should be exempt from state taxation. She put in an exemption request to the Oklahoma Tax Commission, and she had initially won when an administrative law judge held in her favor that she did not have to pay tax. Her case was appealed to the Oklahoma Tax Commission as a whole. They are an arm in many ways of the state. They found against her. That case was appealed to the state Supreme Court. Now, that court had recently been modified because oil and gas industry and others spent a lot of money to unseat two Supreme Court justices who were longstanding justices and who understood Indian law. They weren't there to preside over the Strobel case. When the Oklahoma Supreme Court heard the Strobel case, the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled against her 6-3 because there was a new makeup of the court. That case was submitted for what's called cert to the U.S. Supreme Court in September 2025. And since then, that case has been in consideration by the U.S. Supreme Court to be heard by the full court. I hope they do.
Okay.
The Oklahoma Supreme Court clearly got it wrong.
All right.
And Jonadab, we really need to bring Jason Salzman into the conversation. Okay.
Yes.
Press Secretary for the Muscogee Creek Nation. Jason, in a written statement, Muscogee Principal Chief David Hill says Oklahoma state courts have engaged in what he calls legal gymnastics to get around the McGirt ruling. Explain what he means.
And I hate to cut off Jonadab because he's doing such a wonderful job of framing and explaining this, but thank you for the time today, and I'll be brief in my comments. What Chief meant by those comments is exactly what Jonadab's laid out. The immediate we knew from the arguments, the oral arguments, before the decision came out, the things the rhetoric that was being started already, what the playbook was for the state of Oklahoma. Go a full court press of this is chaos, this is awful, this is going to kill our budgets, this is going to set murderers and rapists free everywhere. And the minute the decision came down, they went in full court press to just a continuation of that. And what they've gotten is they've gotten lower courts that don't have the authority of the United States Supreme Court. They've gotten lower courts to agree with them because of different interests, whether it be landowners. The very first meeting that the governor of Oklahoma, that's been such a thorn in our side, had with the McGirt decision coming down, the very first meeting he had was with landowners, oil interests, and cattle ranchers. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about what this is really about. It's not about criminality. It's not about civil jurisdiction. It's about people that have ran things for a long time, unlegally, and now are afraid that maybe regulation might go to a place they don't want it to go, which is to those darn Indians. We thought we took care of them long ago. Well, nope, here we are. We're not going anywhere. We're strong. We've stood up in the face of incredible opposition to this decision. We've asserted our sovereignty. We've taken this fight to the courts. We've taken it to the streets, and we will not give up. And that's our message. And what Chief meant by the legal gymnastics is we are tired of the United States Supreme Court saying that the law is the law, no matter if time changes, no matter if somebody acts and usurps the legality of the law for years and years and years. It doesn't make it true. So we're standing on that, and we're standing on the fact that the Supreme Court will take up something that has been made in error, and that decision by the Oklahoma Supreme Court has definitely been made in error. The Supreme Court did not say at all that this is just a criminal matter. The only body that has said McGirt was just a criminal matter was the Oklahoma Supreme Court.
Jason, let's talk more about those darn Indians as you describe them there in Oklahoma now.
Well, that's just how they see us. You know what I mean? We're a thorn in their side. We're an inconvenience.
Well, okay, the 5 tribes in Oklahoma, which includes your Muscogee Nation, all backing the Strobel challenge. Let's say let's say she wins on appeal with the Supreme Court. What does that mean now for the 5 tribes?
It means the promise is kept. The promise is fully kept of a reservation for our nation. It means that the state of Oklahoma will have to look in other areas to be a scapegoat for their failings in their budgeting. For too long, this has been by the OTC or anybody else, the Oklahoma Tax Commission or anybody else that's on that side of it has framed this as we can't let them have a reservation because if they're exempt from state income tax, what are we going to do with the $75 million annually that we wouldn't get from those people? That's what they've said. Their studies have shown $75 million annually. Well, our studies have also shown that they haven't taken care of their house. They have a revenue shortfall. They've got high agency demand. They've got an aging demographic in Oklahoma with an outdated tax system. They've got a lot of problems that have nothing to do with the Muscogee Nation being promised and given and affirmed their reservation. So we're not going to be the scapegoat. There will be another way to figure out those budget shortfalls. $75 million a year is a drop in the bucket to the $12 billion that they asked to spend from state agencies. And so in our estimation, we're no longer going to be seen as a problem or as something that it will take money away from Oklahomans. We've heard it all. We have heard that people that drive on the reservation with Muscogee Creek tags are stealing from Oklahomans. We've heard that if you're these people in the governor has said these Creek citizens, they want people to treat them different for their race. And with no understanding at all that we are a political entity, that we are a political classification of citizens of a sovereign nation.
Okay, Jason, we're going to have to take a break, but it also makes a person wonder what could be the implications for other types of regulatory law or civil matters. I'm thinking about home mortgages. I'm thinking about loans. I'm thinking about maybe sales tax. The implications could be huge, but we do have to take a break. We're going to come back. We'll have another guest on the show we're going to talk with, and the phone lines are open for listeners who would like to join us, 1-800-996-2848. Or just 1-800-99-NATIVE. We got a great conversation going here today, folks, and I'd like for some listeners to join us here, especially when we're talking about those darn Indians in Oklahoma. Give us a call, 1-800-99-NATIVE.
Support by the Gathering of Nations Powwow. The last dance is this April 24th and 25th at Expo, New Mexico. Reservations open now for RV and camper camping on the powwow grounds at Expo, New Mexico. Tickets at gatheringofnations.com and at the gates.
Need an actionable plan to achieve your goals? Kaufman & Associates strengthens Native organizations through culturally grounded strategic planning. More at kaufmaninc.com. KAUFFMANINC.com.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. Let's continue with our conversation with regard to Oklahoma and a case that could influence tribal civil jurisdiction cases in the future. We have 2 guests who are talking about this issue with us. We have Jason Salzman, who is the press secretary for the Muscogee Creek Nation, and also Jonadev Chowdhury, who is ambassador of the Muscogee Creek Nation, also principal of Chowdhury Law. And Jonadev, talking with Jason and just before we went into break, it really makes a listener wonder what could be the larger implications here in the event that the Strobel law firm lawsuit is ultimately successful on appeal with the Supreme Court. And just thinking about other types of regulatory law that could be impacted. I mentioned, just for example, mortgages and interest rates. What could ultimately take place here if this lawsuit is successful?
Well, it's a great question. Let's think about what jurisdiction is. Jurisdiction is the authority to enact sensible policy and public safety protections within your area of sovereignty. Muscogee Nation, like all the tribal nations in Oklahoma, has shown that it is a strong partner for everyone within its borders and everyone throughout Oklahoma. There should be nothing at all that's scary about Muscogee Nation having jurisdiction to enact sensible public policy within its borders. That's what it's done for decades and decades and decades, and anybody that knows us knows that there's nothing scary about that. However, that fear factor is what opponents of tribal sovereignties have tried to exploit in their pleadings before the court, in their ad campaigns. They've tried to create this boogeyman of chaos should the nation's sovereignty be respected and recognized. It couldn't be further from the truth, but that has been the angle that they've used. They tried it in the briefs in McGirt and Castro Huerta and in the Strobel case, and we anticipate they'll keep trying it. Now, what is really going on, we really have to look at what jurisdiction's about. Jurisdiction's about sensible public policy, and we have to ask ourselves, why have the oil and gas and agriculture industry been so engaged in cases that on the surface have nothing to do with them, criminal cases like McGirt? It's because if you're able to enact sensible public policy, that could result in public protections that are perhaps scary to those industries. They shouldn't be. Muscogee Nation's always been open for business. We're here to talk with anybody. But they fear any change in the status quo that requires them to work with anybody but the state. Now, civil and criminal jurisdiction are different, but they both use the same definition of Indian country. If Alicia Strobel wins, it won't be a shock to the system. All there will be is clarity that Muscogee Nation has a seat at the table, as it always should have had, in working out sensible public policy with its state and federal partners. That's all that's going to happen. In fact, all of the chaos, all of the chicken little sky is falling narrative that the state has tried to push even before McGirt, none of it's come to pass. In fact, if there are any public safety issues involved, it's because of lack of prosecutions by the state. And back to President Seneca's comments, supporting tribal jurisdiction when it comes to enforcing laws on the ground should be a nonpartisan issue. It's about local control and developing public policy to protect people. If tribes don't have jurisdiction in either civil or criminal arenas, they're subject to the whims of law enforcement and the state government or even the federal government, whose priorities may not be about protecting the safety of Native women. This may not be about protecting the quality of air and water of all the citizens in our localized area of land.
Okay.
Supporting tribal sovereignty is good for state citizens, and it's good for everyone within our boundaries.
Okay. Jonadev Chowdhury, Ambassador of Muscogee Creek Nation, weighing into our show here today on Native America Calling. Let's pivot now to talk about Wisconsin, where a high-stakes standoff between the Lac du Flambeau tribe and federal officials has really reached a fever's peak in many ways. And in order to dissect this issue more, we're joined now by Richard Monette from the Turtle Mountain Reservation. He is Professor Emeritus and former Director of the Great Lakes Indian Law Center at the University of Wisconsin Law School. He is also a citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. Richard, welcome back to Native America Calling. Good to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
This conflict between the Lac du Flambeau tribe, the town of Lac du Flambeau, and now Attorney General Pam Bondi, it centers on 4 roads that were built on tribal land. What's the issue with these roads, and why did the tribe barricade them 3 years ago?
Well, there are big issues, and there are some more smaller sort of practical or technical issues. So it kind of just depends on where we want to start. You know, I heard Jonadev at the end of his discussion talking about enforcing tribal jurisdiction and how that's good for everybody and enforcing tribal laws. This one raises that question, well, what if there are no tribal laws? And that's the bigger question here with this is that the tribe really hasn't, like most tribes, taken the step to, govern property. And so what we have here is just this long time simmering really dispute And it depends on whether the tribe is acting like a sovereign with territory or acting like a property owner, and whether they're having a property dispute. So, sort of interestingly enough, some of these roads date all the way back 120, 30, 40 years ago, when even some of the founders of the state of Wisconsin were doing what they did in northern Wisconsin, which was depleting the resources. And in this case, it was the vast white pine timber forests up there in northern Wisconsin. And of course, they had to get that timber to port, generally on Lake Superior. And so, they needed roads. And believe it or not, a lot of these roads stem back to that time. And so, we can always start with where we should always start, which is this is, largely caused by the United States of America and the whole ugly history of colonialism and all that. And that's accurate. And they should never be able to get away from the table on these kinds of questions, the United States and the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But today, again, the tribe has to decide. If you're going to act like a property owner, you're going to get treated like a property owner. And these property concepts like rights-of-way and easements are going to come to bear. And some court, if they don't govern it, apparently some other court is going to do something like, say, there's a easement by necessity, that concept where a property owner has a right to access their property, even if that means through neighboring private property. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to act like a private property owner, they're going to get treated like it. Are they governing? That's the bigger question here. And, largely like most tribes, they're not. We're not. We don't want to take that fundamental prong of sovereignty. There's territory, there's peoples, and there's recognition. And arguably the most fundamental prong is territory. And we don't want to take that territory, tribes apparently don't want to, and start to govern it and govern all the property within it. Whether it's from allotments or whether it's this burgeoning private property that's happening on every reservation anyway. We just don't seem to want to do that. And so that's kind of what's at fault here. So we have title companies, to those homes, those roads led to homes, and some relatively nice homes, expensive homes out on the lake. And they were told that they had good title. Mm-hmm. They were purchasing a home with good title. And the title company says, well, it's not our job to decide whether you have access. There's a road here. And, of course, the title company is thinking, well, some sovereign governs this territorially. And so, they don't include that in the title search, saying, are you able to use the road to what appears to be a public road to get there? And so, on the other hand, title company, you're inside a reservation. Maybe it's incumbent upon you to dig a little deeper. Okay. See, and so,
Richard.
So there's some responsibilities, but there's also some excuses. And, the bottom line is the tribes have to come to the table.
The tribe sought compensation from the town for trespassing on these tribal lands. They originally sought $20 million, and then the town stopped making payments because they said they just couldn't afford the fees. How has the tribe handled this issue? And is there any precedent that the tribe is following, or is this a completely unique issue?
Well, first I'm going to point out what you said, according to what I said earlier, trespassing. That's a property concept, right? And so we're sitting here like two private properties. We just had a long discussion on your show about sovereignty, and then the next segment is a tribe acting like a private property owner. That's not a sovereign. The state of Wisconsin owns land right nearby there. They call it a state park. That doesn't mean they don't govern the property next door. They govern both. And so you don't only govern what you own, you govern your territory, okay? Or you're going to get treated like a property owner. So that's what's happening here. So the rest of your question, well, yeah, there are several sort of precedent and are ongoing. You can say that these kinds of disputes are ongoing across Indian country. We had at the MHA 3 affiliated tribes in North Dakota, they had one very similar. They had non-natives with homes along Lake Sacagawea there, and the tribe went across the reservation, arguably crossed tribal land. The tribe was, going to stop that or start charging for it. And they reached some sort of agreement. Some was sort of above ground. I think some was sort of behind the scenes, which is okay. These are two sovereigns, the United States and the tribe. And they figured things out. And this was probably, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We have a dispute going on like it right now in one of the pueblos in northern Mexico, where, non-natives have bought homes inside the pueblo lands because it's kind of nice, and maybe there was some consent at one point with workers who worked up at Los Alamos, and so now they're there, and now they're driving wherever they want, and now the tribe wants to say, hold on a second, okay, you got a home here, but you don't just get to drive wherever you want, and so that is potentially ready to boil over like this. We have missurveyed reservation boundaries like happened at Quinault and Crow, and there's others. We have missurveyed lands within reservations where the Bureau of Indian Affairs gave some right-of-way to a state for a state or county highway, and the highway deviated from the section line, but surveyors didn't pay attention to that, and so they surveyed off the center of the road. Well, the center of the road was the section line. And so we got problems all over Indian country like that. And, and the thing that's missing is the tribe coming to the table and governing it.
Okay.
Not owning property, governing it.
Richard, the conflict escalated with U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany and U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi now working on behalf of the town, telling the tribe they must pay the money back. And we did reach out to both the Lac du Flambeau tribe and also U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany to appear on the show. We didn't hear anything back from them by showtime. But what's the rationale here, and what are the larger implications overall for sovereignty?
It's not uncommon for a U.S. congressperson to contact the Department of Interior, and ask those solicitors for their position here, and even to engage. And that would have been the appropriate thing. To the extent that we have some litigation and some continued posturing, makes that, in my opinion, wholly inappropriate for the Congressman Tiffany to have called the Department of Justice and saying, jump in and take a position here and take the position I want. Side with the United States of America against this tribe. But I got that. But Congressman Tiffany has had some things put in front of him that could have fixed this. He's in the United States Congress. He had the power to fix it. He still does. It was going to include bringing some money to the table because this tribe has never been compensated for those roads. He has not done that to my knowledge. And if he has, it apparently wasn't enough to tilt the scales since it hasn't happened yet. And, I don't think highly of Congressman Tiffany. I don't mind saying that publicly in today's atmosphere. But he had opportunities to do this and to try to bring people together to do it right, and he did not. And so what's happening now is an unfortunate and maybe sort of unconventional, maybe almost unlawful sort of interaction. And it should not proceed that way. This should be the solicitors at the Department of Interior working this out, politicals coming to the table politically, not legally. And if we have litigation, then the Department of Justice can weigh in.
And those fees, what's the status on that? Do you know?
I don't know that. I kind of got drawn into the weeds a couple of times from both sides, and I just extracted myself and said I'm not representing anybody here, so I don't know when it gets to that kind of detail what they're doing with actual negotiations on the ground to work it out. One thing is for sure, it's clearly not enough because it hasn't worked out yet.
All right. We're going to have to wrap up this conversation. We're out of time, but really, really good conversations here today on Native America Calling. Hope you enjoyed listening, folks. And I want to thank all of our guests who joined us, Richard Monette, Jonadev Chowdhury, Jason Salzman, and President J.C. Seneca. And just because the conversation has to end doesn't mean the dialogue has to end also. So feel free to engage with us on our social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. And you can also go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com, and post a comment. Tell us what you liked about today's show and what other topics you'd like to learn about here on Native America Calling. And with that, I'd encourage all of you to join us again tomorrow when we will visit with Native artists at the upcoming Heard Museum Indian Affair and another notable exhibition. Until then, I'm your host, Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day.
colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that?
Fully give grace.
That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.